us. Also, we'll have one of us, Mrs. Chukwunta Ifunanya, who will be moderating today's session as well. But before we delve into today's workshop, let's try to take some ground rules. Well, first of all, let's try to mute our devices at all times. If you want to ask questions, you can raise your hands and we'll take your question. Secondly, an attendance survey will be shared during the question and answer session. Try as much as possible to fill the attendance survey, as it will enable you to get the slides and the recording of the session. Thirdly, this workshop is being live streamed on our socials, and for some of us who would like to put on our camera, kindly maintain a professional background, as you would not want to see yourself in not so good environment on our socials. Fourthly, also, let's try to rename our devices. For those of us that will be joining with our phones, kindly rename your device to help us identify you by your name. Lastly, this workshop is going to be a very insightful one. So I would advise you to get your jotters and pen to take a lot of notes and also pay close attention, as I believe our speaker today is really prepared for us. I will be handing over to the moderator, Mrs. Chukwunta Ifunanya, to take over the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Aisha.
Miss Ifunanya,
Yeah.
are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, because we can't hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Trinity Global Business School Leadership Excellence Program. My name is Ifunanya Chukwunta, Secretary at Trinity University, and it is my pleasure to moderate today's event, which brings top personality from prestigious industries to the Trinity Global Business School. I'm so excited about today's program, and I know you also are very, very excited. Today, we have our special guest, Mr. Westley Igbo, who will be speaking to us on the topic, strategic communication, leading change through dialogue and negotiation. I'm going to start with Mr. Westley's brief bio. Westley Igbo is a strategic communication leader, shaping how impact. As senior communication and engagement manager at their UK, he leads high impact communication strategies. With over a decade of experience across UK and Africa, Westley has driven communications from major international development and public sector programs, including initiatives with NHS England, GIS, ECOWAS, MacArthur Foundation, European Union, and USAID. His work spans health, governance, energy, social justice, and international development, consistently translating complex ideas into compiling narratives that influence policy, partnership, and behavior. Westley holds a master's in communication science at the University of Vienna and a bachelor degree in mass communication from Nnamdi Azikiwe University. He is particularly interested in the role of emerging technologies, including AI and immersive tools, in making communication more inclusive, accessible, and effective at scale. A compelling and insightful speaker, Westley brings practical experience, global perspective, and forward-looking thinking to conversations on strategic communication, digital engagement, and innovation for impact. All right, with that being said, Mr. Weasley, we are eager to hear your insights on strategic communication, leading change through dialogue and negotiation. Please, sir, you can take the floor.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction. I hope you can hear me, just to confirm. Can everyone hear
Yes,
me?
I can hear you, sir.
Lovely stuff. So, that was very comprehensive. You practically read out my entire bio, so I don't think I need to say any more about me. In summary, I've worked over the last more than a decade at the intersection of communication, influencing, and systems change. So that is my bread and butter, essentially. And today's session is about that, strategic communication and influence and how change power, can be powered rather through dialogue and negotiation. So, I'll just start with a bit of a context setting, which would be just a brief story, if you like. So, uh, meet Miss Bebe Lahot Ikweji. Uh, Ms. Lahot is the CEO of Namide Hot Marketing Limited, Lagos, Nigeria. Um, and she's noticed an uptick in AI adoption across so many different marketing businesses, home and abroad. She's feeling like her company needs to get on board that train to make business processes better, faster, and to support clients with deeper insights. Essentially, to leverage the advantages that come with using AI tools and technologies. And so, what does she do? She goes into full-blown strategy development mode, and she comes up with this exciting, robust change process, right? And then she goes out with a big announcement to staff. Hey guys, we're going AI. Everyone should get on board. We need to do this as quickly as possible. Go get it done. No questions asked. But the thing about her is that she's a big madam, so she doesn't think she needs to do any more than that. So she doesn't invest any time or effort into doing some really good internal communication. So staff are not really on board. They don't really know what to do. They're feeling confused. They're feeling disoriented. It's not really clear to them how exactly to pursue this change process. So she meets a lot of resistance. And ultimately, that strategy, that change process fails. And Namide Hot remains an analog marketing company. So what we can learn from this short story is that most times strategy doesn't fail, but it's communication that does. Because when people are excluded from the change process, they are not carried along from the get-go. They don't have that buy-in. They don't have skin in the game. They're not fully committed. And many times they don't even know what to do. And so the strategy fails. And which is why we're here today, really. So why does all of this matter? Leadership and communication work together. You can't lead effectively without communicating effectively. And communication breeds influence. When you communicate effectively, you gain influence because influence is the currency of the social and professional economy. And that's what you use to effect change, right? But for change to happen, it must start with a conversation. So it's all intertwined. And this whole concept of strategic communication with negotiation and influence towards effecting change becomes very, very important. So that is why it matters. So one might ask, what is strategic communication? And from my experience, it's usually not very clear to people what it is really, strategic communications. You get a lot of long-winded, complex answers, a lot of consulting speak that make very little sense to you. But in a nutshell, strategic communication is the deliberate, goal-driven communication designed to influence outcomes. So you have a goal set, you're looking to achieve a specific outcome, and then you craft special messages for different audiences disseminated through different channels according to what works for what audience towards achieving that goal and ultimately to influence things in that direction. So that's what strategic communication is all about. So from the message, you shape perceptions and then you inspire action. So, how did we get here? I think it's really important for us to look at the timeline of events, how strategic communication has evolved over time, because it'll give us a lot of context in terms of just grasping why we need it in today's business landscape. So, in the 1900s, which had a lot of military governments, it wasn't a very democratic environment at the time. The order of the day was propaganda and persuasion. Essentially, governments and big institutions will prepare something, a piece of communication, dump it on the people, hand it down like a decree or an instruction, and sometimes a notice. And people are expected to respond in a given way because if they don't, there will be consequences. So they did very little to persuade them. The message and the power they wielded did the persuasion. So the 1900s weren't a particularly interesting time or free time for people. And then from there to the 1950s to 80s, things started getting better with the advent of public relations and media. So with PR came legacy media platforms like radio, TV, newspaper. People started to see other views on different subjects rather than just being handed down one view to adopt and act on. And then it made things a bit more democratic. People could put in opinion editorials, people could make commentary, people got on TV, talked about salient issues in society, and it just made things a bit more accessible and less rigid than it was in the 1900s. Then came corporate communication between the 1990s to the 2000s, right? Now organizations now saw the need to get on board that evolution in strategic communication. They needed to start thinking about how to work their engines internally and externally to get their staff talking to each other, doing things in a coherent way, promoting their business through external media platforms, putting out brand messaging, getting people to think of them in a positive way. And that's what corporate communication was all about and still is today. But it took flight at about that time between the 1990s to 2000s. And fast forward to today, where we have integrated influence ecosystems. So it's a combination of everything. You're dealing with staff internally, you're working with social media influencers out there, you're speaking with journalists in media platforms right across the space, home and abroad. It's just one big comms and media world that we're dealing with today, and everyone is talking back. Feedback is the order of the day. So if you put something out, you can expect to hear something back from the people that you've put it out to. So that's how things have really flowed from the 1900s up until today, and hopefully that gives us a bit more context. Right. So when we talk about strategic communications and the concept of change management, I always like to share one core principle that I go by, and I would argue that many people go by, and that is that people scarcely resist change, right? It's not about the change itself, it's about being excluded from it. So when you don't carry people along, they tend to not be receptive to the change you're trying to effect. But when you carry them along, take them on that journey, they feel part of the process and as such are committed to it. So if you have this core principle at the back of your mind while delivering any change management process, it just helps to frame things from a mental standpoint a bit more positively and puts you in a better position to succeed. But who do you need to talk to, right? That's where stakeholder mapping comes into play. Who do you need to include when we talk about inclusion, right? To do that, I always look at something I call a stakeholder mapping quadrant. Some people call it a power interest matrix. And if you look at the y-axis, that's the arrow pointing upwards to the left side of the graph that says stakeholder power. It just shows you one half of the quadrant high and then the other low. And then on the x-axis, which is stakeholder interest, you see the spectrum from low to high. So the first quadrant to the top left corner, you should keep satisfied because they have high power. They can make things really bad for you if they're not satisfied. So you want to engage with them as much as you can to keep them satisfied. So that's high power, low interest. So they don't have that much interest, but you need to keep them happy to keep your business going. And if we look at the quadrant to the right of it, manage closely, those are the guys that have high power to make things happen in your business and also have high interest. They really want to know what's going on. They've got skin in the game. And usually that's your customers, that's your company executives, board members, shareholders. So those guys you really want to keep in the know as much as possible and engage as frequently as possible. And if we come downwards to the bottom left corner, those are the guys with low power and low interest. And for them, you just want to monitor. You just want to keep an eye out and take notice of their existence and how they might influence things. And then for the last one, it's high interest, low power, who you should just keep informed. So this is a very helpful quadrant to help you just understand who needs to be where, who needs to be talked to at what point, how frequently, through what channel, with which messages. All of that you can decipher using the stakeholder mapping quadrant. In terms of influence, this is something that is really, really important. Like I said earlier, it's your currency in a social and professional economy. So you need to adopt a methodical approach while trying to achieve a certain level of influence in your business space. And it's a model I call the CCRE influence model, right? And there are four key questions you need to ask yourself. The first one is on credibility. The people you're trying to influence, do they trust you? If not, you need to build that trust. You need credibility to be able to influence people. The next one is, do they understand you? Are you achieving sufficient clarity in the messages you're putting out to them? Do they understand you? Because if they don't, it's dead on arrival. You need to make sense to them in the first place. And then relevance. Does it matter to them? Why? Why should you be talking to them? Why does this mean anything to them, right? That question you need to answer in trying to influence your stakeholders. And emotion, very important. You need to make them feel something. It's not just about giving them information, it's about evoking emotions through the information that you transmit to them. And speaking of information, that's where designing messaging comes in, right? You really need to figure out what it is you want your stakeholders to know in the first place. And based on what they know, you need to figure out how you want them to feel. And then ultimately, they need to know what to do as a result of what they know and feel. So these are three core things you need to take into consideration when designing your message, because the message is critical in gaining influence and communicating strategically in your business space. Right. So I talked about the 1900s when it was essentially just a broadcast out there to people, right? So we'll do a bit of a comparative analysis with dialogue, which I mentioned earlier. The change begins with a conversation, dialogue between key stakeholders, right? So in broadcasts, it's one way, top down. You hand it down to people, the rest is history. Whatever happens doesn't concern you. But in dialogue, it's a two-way street. You put it out, you listen, you hear back from them, and then based on what they've told you, you iterate. You go back to the process, make sure that you are aligned with your audience or your stakeholder, and then you adjust where necessary. For broadcasts, it's about achieving control, making sure that people do things the way you want or they do what you want them to do. But with dialogue, it's about building trust, mutual trust between both sides of the divide. You as the business communicator, and then they as the business stakeholder or audience or target market, as the case may be. And then lastly, with broadcasts, you're announcing something. You just want people to know. It's like FYI, right? But for dialogue, it's about engaging. It's about making them engage in active interaction with you on a specific subject. And with that, they gain a deeper understanding of things and they want to be more involved. So these are the core differences between one way of doing it, which I will strongly discourage if you're looking to influence and negotiate change, and then dialogue, which is another way. So listening, I think this is something that a lot of people underrate in strategic communication, especially in trying to achieve change. They don't really pay that much attention to it because they feel like, oh, if you design the message, you know the right stakeholders, and you put it all out there, people know what they should be doing. That's it. In other words, Bebe Lahot's approach, right? So um, listening is really, really important. Really, really important. And it is not waiting to speak, right? Because most of us, we just listen to respond. It's like what people say, listen to us or to understand, don't listen to respond. So listening is really important because with that, you get all the feedback you need to make sure that your change management process is progressing as planned and whatever improvements you need to make, you're getting that piece of insight to make them. So listening is really, really important. So let's pivot a bit to negotiation. When we talk about negotiation, a lot of people think it's about cutting deals. And little do you know, really, that every single moment in leadership is an act of negotiation. Every business activity is a negotiation process. Whether you're seeking resources to do something, whether you're trying to align on objectives, or whether you're trying to define priorities, it's all negotiation. Even internal meetings are negotiation scenarios. So it's part and parcel of the leadership process, just as much as communication is. So it's something that everyone in business, whether business owner or business professional, should really understand the art of negotiating. So to understand the art of negotiation, I refer to the IOTA model, right? And this also, like the influence model, has four key proponents as well. So the first one is about interests. You don't hand down your position on things. Rather, you find out what people want and you use that as leverage to get them on board. So it's not about arguing your position, it's about finding out their interest and working things out, leveraging that to meet your own interest. And it's also about creating value through exploring options. Sometimes what people need, the interest that you found out on the part of your negotiating party is not something very feasible for you. But what you do is to explore what options are available to you. And that's how you create value. So if option A doesn't work, could option B potentially work? If we need more resources to do things and we just can't source it, can we downsize on a lower priority deliverable so that we can channel more effort and resources towards this one that we want to move forward in the shortest possible time? So that's the concept of creating and exploring options to create value. So the third one is about protecting relationships, really. And if you notice, trust is a recurring theme in this conversation because it's really important when it comes to influencing, negotiating, communicating, and leading, if you like. So it's really, really important because the relationships you build today, the trust you establish today would be the reason you make the deal tomorrow. And then finally is alternatives. To be in a very good negotiating position, you need to have an alternative, right? And it's a consideration that was made popular by two gentlemen, Robert Fisher and William O'Reilly. They came up with the BATNA concept, which means best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So what is your plan B? Because that's essentially what BATNA is. It's your fallback option if your preferred um, negotiation does not take flight. So always have one so that if you need to walk away, you can do so with a viable alternative. So these are the four key cardinal points across the IOTA negotiation model to help you negotiate from a place of strength and to do things in a way that balances interests across uh, the divide between negotiator and the other party. So let's look at a few cases, right? A few case studies where strategic communication was leveraged in a change process or in trying to get influence or in negotiating a position or in remedying a crisis situation, because they're quite varied cases that we have here. So we'll look at one case in the private sector, we'll look at another in the public sector, and a third one globally, right? So Flutterwave, yay, one of the biggest fintech companies out there, not just in Nigeria, but in several African countries, and I think through partnerships even beyond Africa. So Flutterwave took flight like a NASA rocket, went up the sky, started scaling up rapidly. It grew so, so big. And with that level of attention and influence, questions start coming up because regulators are paying attention, right? Competitors are playing the fast game, doing things to get you to, cave on one front or the other. So it's very easy for people to pick on areas where you might be faltering. In the case of Flutterwave, it was concerns around compliance, risk management, and security, right? So in was that 2022, 2023 in Kenya, a high court put out an order suspending about several accounts, I would say, just not to put a number on it, for about 14 days on the grounds of non-compliance. And then Flutterwave had to come out after a really long period of time where they didn't respond to that. People were complaining, raising issues. They finally came out and put out an article there responding to the media reports, trying to explain things. But the problem with that was that they were reactive. They waited for the crisis to take hold fully before they put out that response. I mean, it did something at the end of the day to quell the tensions, but the deed had been done. They had taken a bit of a reputational hit, and they now had to recover from that. Whereas if they were a bit more proactive, things would have been different. So there was a lesson for them to learn there, and it was that comms cannot be only reactive. You don't wait for things like this to happen before you go out there to put out the explanation that you've done now. So I think they learned from that, and that's why just 2 months ago, they put out another article just outlining all of the efforts they've put down to make sure that they have a robust risk management process, they've got good security, and they are compliant with regulations locally and internationally. So I think that's a lesson there for business leaders who are functioning in a high risk sector, just to make sure that you have proactive comms, tactics, measures in place to position your business appropriately so that things like this do not happen. So that's the first case. The next case is one we might be all too familiar with, and that's the Nigerian government, right? The first one is the tax laws. We know them very well. The good old tax laws that we all know and love, that Nigerians really did not appreciate, but the government cracked on with minimal consultation. People don't even know what's in those laws. There were talks about the laws not being the actual laws that those in parliament signed off on, all sorts of things. So it was shrouded in very opaque, unclear comms. They needed to do a lot better, quite frankly, about that. But for now, I think it's just been suspended. We don't know what's become of that. So that's the first case where they've paid zero attention to strategic communications to influence the people into accepting this change in tax regime. The second one is the power sector, where some people are on band A, others are on band B, some are on band C, and everyone is paying through their noses trying to get power supply, and at the end of the day, they still don't get it. So discos are not very happy. Business isn't going well for them. People are complaining. It's just chaos in the power sector. And recently, the minister resigned. Somebody else has come in saying he can't assure 100% power supply, but things will get better. So it's all just one big. I'm trying to be nice here, but I think the government can do a bit better in terms of managing communication, influence, negotiating with the people, consulting them in rolling out some of these policies. So that's the public sector, and there's a lot for us to learn there, and we'll keep our eyes and ears peeled to see what becomes of that. So let's take things more to the global stage. Microsoft, we know Microsoft all too well, probably using a Microsoft computer right now. Microsoft had a culture and relevance problem, I would say. Staff felt that there was a closed culture approach within the company. Wall Street and Silicon Valley said Microsoft was drifting into oblivion, sliding away from relevance, all sorts of things. And then to address these problems, Microsoft brought in a man called Satya Nadella in 2014. He came in to right the wrong, to shift the tide for Microsoft, right? The first thing he did was to get on board a close ally in Kathleen Hogan, a non-HR business leader who came in and took the role of Chief Human Resources Officer. And what Kathleen did was to launch that growth mindset, right? To move the company away from a know-it-all, leadership knows it all, we're transmitting things down to learn it all. Let's listen to staff. Let's hear what they're saying. And with that, we can build things together. And things have really changed since then. Microsoft is back at the top, one of the most valuable tech companies out there. So the cases we've gone through have shown us in different sectors and segments of business how communication can really influence things internally, externally, and otherwise. So it's really, really important. So I think they also do a great job of showing us exactly how to fail in some of those cases. And the recurring theme was trust. Trust erodes when communication is reactive. We saw that in the case of Flutterwave. When it's defensive, in the same case, it was there as well, because the article they put out there was essentially just defending their position, not really saying much about what they've done to right the wrong and what it would be going forward. And then unclear, which we see a lot in the case of the government's policies on tax and power, right? But now we know exactly how to fail. How do we not fail, right? First one is to always define outcomes. Make it clear what you're trying to achieve with your comms efforts. It needs to be crystal clear because only then can you go about crafting your messages, determining which stakeholders to work with, how to influence them, and all of that, right? And then you need to engage before announcing. Don't be like Bebela Hot Ikweji. Speak to staff, speak to internal stakeholders, engage with them, get feedback from them, listen to them, and iterate if you need to. Revisit your change process if you need to before you go out with a big announcement. And then people like a good story. It's not just about the data. Data is good, right? It puts things into empirical perspective, but a story evokes that emotion that gives you that influence you're looking to achieve to make the change. And then feedback loops, really, really important. And I spoke to this a bit earlier. You need to listen to get feedback. So if you do all these five things, most often than not, you will be successful in your comms efforts. Right, so let's take a moment to reflect. Are you currently leading a change process? You might be, whether as a business owner or as a business leader, or indeed any other walk of life. You might be leading a change process, but think for a moment, right? Who are you not talking to? Who have you not spoken to? That's a very important question because everybody must be carried along. You might think that this specific group maybe doesn't need that much. Maybe all you need to do is just one round of communication and you're good. That might not be the case. So you need to really reflect on your change process and figure out who you haven't spoken to. And not just that, what should you be telling them? There are other questions. So it's a broad-based reflection rather than just who it is you haven't spoken to. So let me just take you through a few key takeaways as I try to conclude. Comms is leadership. I talked about this earlier. You can't take away communication from leadership. You need it to lead effectively. Influence is not done in passing. It is intentional. You have to purposefully craft messages, evoke emotions to achieve the influence you need to drive change. Change does not start unless you dialogue. You have to start a conversation, talk to people, get them on board, and then they join the change train and you achieve what you're trying to achieve. So it begins with dialogue, very important. And then the last one is that negotiation is business as usual. It's not something that happens only when deals are about to be struck. It happens on a daily basis. Every act of business management is a potential negotiation process. So with these four key takeaways, it basically sums up what we've been talking about today. And I'll end with this statement. The most powerful leaders don't just speak, they shape conversations, right? They really shape conversations. It's not just about PR, putting out the right media tactics and just getting people to notice you speaking the best English in the room. It's not about that. It's more about shaping than speaking. And the wise words of a gentle fellow, well, not so gentle fellow, I'd argue, ring true and emphasize this point ever so strongly. And it says, a genuine leader, he says, a genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. I don't know if anyone can guess who said this, but if you guessed Martin Luther King Jr., you are absolutely correct. So, thank you very much for listening to me. Do appreciate your time and feel free to ask any questions if you've got them. I know there's a segment for that, so um, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look up Westley Igbo. There are not that many Westley Igbos out there, so you should hopefully find me right away. I've got my picture up as well, so you should recognize me. I'll show my face in a moment once I take my presentation off. And feel free to take the conversation forward offline by sending an email to Wesley with a T gmail.com. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ifunanya.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Wesley, for this insightful session. I believe the students have learned a lot because I have also learned a lot from this. I really appreciate you. Okay, I don't know if anybody has any questions to ask. Students, any question for Mr. Wesley, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, carry on.
Good afternoon, Mr. Westley.
Good afternoon, Humphrey.
Yes, very interesting topic, and your case studies. It's rare to come to workshops like this, and the facilitator uses, real case scenarios, especially as it touches our current realities, to explain the topic, which is very interesting. So
Indeed.
when you were talking, I was just ransacking my head, and you talked a lot about the the verbal and mostly the verbal part of strategizing your communication. All right. When you talk about crafting your message, the things you have to do before you craft your message and everything. So as we are talking about, leading, not just in the organization, but also when you talked about the government. So I was thinking about body language, the personality that talks, the personality that calls for influence. So what do you say about that? Because sometimes you might have very good strategy, very good, content out there, clear, very understandable. However, the person communicating it might be exhibiting some unclear attitude and trajectories that will make some people to disbelieve. So what do you say about that? The person communicating.
Yes, indeed, Prof. I think that's a really, really great observation you've made there. I think the person is just as important as the message. So if that didn't come across in my presentation, it should have. I guess maybe that might have been a bit of a let off on that regard, but it is indeed very important for you to talk through the right person. And you cast my mind back a bit to a project we did several years back. It was a community engagement project, right? In the power sector. I used to work a lot in the power sector a few years ago. And what we're trying to do was to get solar home systems and mini grids into rural communities. And we tried to get the message out there ourselves. By our here, I mean the government agency leading that effort, but couldn't get through until we went through key opinion leaders. I'm talking about religious leaders, I'm talking about community heads and all that. So the moment we made that switch into those key opinion leaders, the messages landed a lot stronger. People took ownership and we made headway entry into those communities. So it's just to contextualize what I said earlier, that the person is just as important as the message. So thanks for raising that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Any other questions or comments? So it's a discussion, right? It's not just about asking questions. You can raise some points like this, like Professor Humphrey did, and we can just have a conversation, really. I don't know how much time we've got for that, but as many as we can take, we should. And if
Okay.
someone's looking at the chat
So,
as well.
okay, so someone on the chat box dropped a question. Vincent Ezediora.
Okay.
So he
Uh,
said, in light of recent public narrative, like the Born Bread saga and the Tony Elumelu daughter's status discussion, how might a strategic leadership communication approach have altered the tone, public perception, and stakeholder trust in these situations? Specifically, what key communication principles or decisions do you think were missed, and how could they have been applied differently? Wow,
yeah,
that's a very powerful question.
yeah, that's a trailer load of questions there. Well,
So we'll take it one
unfortunately,
after the other.
yeah, that's fine. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened with Tony and his daughter, so it'll be very difficult for me to express any views on that because
I think
I
he's
need to.
talking about the issue with someone that posted
Hmm.
something around Tony Elumenu's daughter and vice versa,
Hmm. Well,
right? Or Mr.
yeah.
Vincent, can you unmute yourself and explain your question well?
I think the question is clear. The problem is
Okay.
not
Yes.
okay. Carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Well, the Tony Elumelu was more of like the daughter was there was a health lab result that was posted online showing that the daughter was more of like HIV positive. And the next thing we had was that the guy picked up the guy and locked them up.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? But some people are of the opinion that you don't need to actually go to that extent to lock the young man up. After all, you live in the social media space, you enjoy social media, galore that comes with it. Why not just go to the public, in quote, I'm just looking at it from the different perspective that go to the public, do an HIV status report and just share the result. And that will just end all the matter. But he acted the other way around by picking the guy up, locking him up, and so persecution is
Hmm.
also actually going on now. So it's more of like trying to look at communication now. How do you manage such thing? Because you said something about trying to mitigate the impact of your action or actions of the other persons, so that we don't get to see ourselves in a very terrible situation.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I need to make really clear is that something as sensitive as someone's health status is not something that should be a topic of discussion in a public media space. So I think rather than going to do a test and making it public and all that, you really don't have any explanation to give to anybody. He's not running for office. This is even his daughter, not he himself. So I wouldn't recommend that. Rather, I would have put out a statement just requesting that whoever has done that should stop and respect the privacy of people because health information is confidential. It's not something that should be a topic of discussion. And just assure everyone that she's in good health, has no problem, and if she has any problems, they'll take it up with her physician. And it's an internal confidential affair, and everyone should desist from doing that. But it was absolutely wrong to pick anybody up, and this is the impunity we see a lot in Nigeria because we can. The high and powerful just go ahead and pick people up at the slightest provocation, which to me, I think is barbaric, for lack of a better term. So that's what I think on that matter. I don't have all the details, but I think after the session, I'll look into it and see what's really going on there. Thank you very much, Vincent.
Okay. This saga, I have gone through it. I have, read a lot about it, and we are discussing it somewhere. And we came to a certain conclusion that Tony Elumelu is someone that has a lot of foundations, supporting, just causes.
Mm-hmm.
And if he used his emotional intelligence well, he has the money. This could have been an opportunity to kind of start a promotion of the, how would I put it, a promotion that will stop the stigmatization of people that have such sicknesses.
Exactly.
Nigeria is a very, I don't want to sound insulting, but we are still backward in education.
Indeed.
HIV, somebody having HIV is not the end of the world, and it's not like the person is having leprosy. There are a
It's
lot
not a
of
death
drugs that
sentence,
come
yeah.
out, to take care of these things. And as there are so many people with HIVs, and they are moving, and they are looking healthier than people who have it, and they are doing great things. So I think, yes, in addition to, of course, coming to the public to say, my daughter is fine, is good, then he would have launched, a media promotion to say, by the way, people that have this kind of thing, why do we, stigmatize them, create some kind of radio discussions around this to stop this type of, he can even fund the bill for this and change the narrative for Nigeria. Nigeria is a place that you just need to start something. And before you know it, it can change the narrative. Nigerians are it's just a little thing can trigger something, and you can change the narrative. Do you understand? So I saw it as an opportunity to even do something that will benefit a whole lot of people out there suffering from this kind of thing. And in fact, the empathy or sympathy or whatever, in fact, he will win the whole, entire social media population. I don't know if you understand. So
yeah,
going that side of picking up somebody, sending to the prison, you know how the social media is, they will always back the person that they feel is victimized. Do you understand? So I think that's where he got it wrong. He would have used the opportunity to elevate himself, elevate his foundations, do something very different from what people would have even expected. That's the way I also look at it from that
100%.
perspective.
And if you think about the fact that Nigeria has the second highest number of HIV new infections in the world, second only to South Africa, you kind of see the need for something like that. But at the same time, it comes down to business priorities, right? And what Tony and his foundation and his portfolio of businesses think is the right thing to do from a PR standpoint. For them, they might think, oh, this is not what we want to get into right now. There's always that business consideration, but it's a good idea actually to spin that to gain a bit more social capital there and to help solve a real problem to Nigeria. And I'm saying this as someone who very recently worked on a social and behavior change communication campaign funded by USAID on HIV prevention. So it's a real problem facing us right now. Okay, just conscious of time. We've only got 2 minutes left. Fumini, Peter, would you like to come in here?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mr. Wesley. I really appreciate this topic and the way you handle it. It's a very interesting one. I just want to say a few things. You know, um, uh, in communication, I discovered that most times one of the problems that comes with communication is interference that is the place of power now. Now, say someone wants to pass an information and there is someone who is at the top interferes the information and it doesn't flow, it will not flow well. Then that distorts. I mean, it distorts the essence of the information. And you have also we have someone talked about the person that's carrying the information. Distrust, especially when they don't have trust in a certain individual, and you are trying to make that same individual to pass an information down to people. It's have great impact on the effectiveness of that information. From day one, that information is dead on arrival. Then also, we talked about people resist exclusion, people resisting exclusion, and I think the reason for that most times is because um, most of the information, especially here in this part of the world, Africa, Nigeria, even till now, not even in the 1900s, so even till now, they still practice what we call dictatorship, and organizations currently they still want to force narrative. So dictatorship is what is actually affecting most people. When you dictate to them, do this, they feel like, why should I do it? So it's just so that's my contribution. It's better to dialogue than to dictate to people that this is what you should do. But if they see a reason why they should do it, it's more easier for them to do what you're asking them to do. That's just my contribution. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so very much. Very useful contributions you have there. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is it. That's all we have time for. But
Sorry, sir. There is a question that is on the comment section.
Okay.
So, Mr. Emeka Mba is asking that incident management and crisis resolution is a cross-functional team that most employees in multinational companies can relate with. This team often activates a reactive firefighting mode, which had already been adumbrated. In most cases, they have a well-crafted holding statement. Sir, what are your thoughts and recommendations to the model of reactive communication in relation to building stakeholders' trust?
Okay. Multinational companies, the team often activates. I'm just trying to grasp it. It's quite a complex one there. Yeah, so I'll just do my best to respond to that. So holding statements are perfectly in order, but in full-blown crisis situations, right? And that's the one time where it makes sense to react because you have a full-blown crisis. If you don't do anything at this point, the reputational damage could be immense. So you do have to react. But in terms of building trust, right? Building trust does not happen in a crisis situation, even though it can happen after the situation, depending on how you manage it. It happens way before, right? And that's why I talked about being proactive. You need to already be talking about how you operate as a business, right? Long before a crisis or an incident happens. You need to talk about the things you're doing, the values that you hold dear, your approach, your culture, all of those good stuff. And then if a crisis comes, you can respond. And if it takes you unawares, if you put out the holding statements, the trust you've built leading up to that point will help people receive it and, just understand things with you. So if the question is more around building stakeholder trust, I think that happens or that should happen long before you get into a crisis situation. But firefighting in a full-blown crisis situation is something you cannot help. So holding statements can help, but be sure to build trust long before then. by the way you operate through dialogue, trying to influence, talk about thought leadership pieces, talk about PR strategies, different things you can do, town halls, stakeholder engagements to build that trust before the fire starts burning. So that's what I think is the best approach. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it certainly does.
All right. Thank you very much. Will that be all?
Yes. Thank you so
Beautiful
much,
stuff.
Mr. Wesley, for your time and for the wonderful session. And of course, thank you so much, Ifunanya. Thank you for your time and for moderating the session as well. So before you go, I would like to invite Mr. Daniel to speak on DGBS program. Mr. Daniel, are you there?
Yes, very much present. Thank you. All right. Good day, everyone. And Mr. Wesley, thank you so much. Also to the moderator, Ifunanya, thank you so much. It's been an insightful session, and I personally gained a lot. So briefly, without taking much of our time, I'm speaking on behalf of the head of admissions from the admissions department, Trinity Global Business School. And once again, it's to spur your interest regarding the master's programs. As you know, there is no other person in the world that can be as responsible and willing to move forward as you would want for yourself. So the decision is practically on you to decide. So we have commenced another phase of what we call the early bird scholarship. And this is not because it is available, but because the Trinity Global Business School is an inclusive institution, and we're looking at the broader picture of actually having to house a lot of professionals like most of you who are here, who are yet to be part of us, and to make it flexible enough for you. So that's why we have that room. So there are slots available that we're looking forward to well-to-do people like you keying into. And also to let you know that no one else can, take responsibility again, just like I mentioned, as you would for yourself. So we want you to take this responsibility. We have corporate foundation programs that we offer. We also have MSc in data science and AI. We have MBAs ranging from strategic human resource management, strategic digital marketing, and other range of programs that we have. And they are all designed with internationality in focus, meaning that your certificate gives you the credibility you need to actually scale through other parts of Europe and beyond. And just to mention, in case there is any other, I love to say we are the only business school situated in Nigeria that offers a full-fledged master's program with the 90 ECTS, of course, level 7, that's a European qualification framework standard. So you might want to, ask why I've mentioned this. It's because we have different masters. You get 30 CTS, 60 CTS, but we bring the adequate masters that you need. And I would also like you to do your research on the difference and see where value lies. So just that being said, it's again to bring you in, and we're eagerly waiting for you to join this great community. And Mr. Wesley, we hope to see you again. Personally, I would love to join the session where you are part of us again, so that I can also get to ask some questions today I wasn't able to. Thank you, Head of Career Service, Ms. Chiamaka. That will be all from the admissions department for today.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel. And to everyone on this call, if you are forgetting anything, don't forget that negotiation is a daily lifestyle. So just hold on to that. Having said that, I would like us to connect with Mr. Wesley on LinkedIn. I know a lot of us still have some questions or some clarifications that I would like to make. You can connect with him on LinkedIn as Westley Igbo. He's also on Instagram. You can also connect with him as West with the T, Yeah, that's still Westley
Westley with a
Igbo.
T.
And of course, our moderator too is also on LinkedIn, Ifunanya Chukwunta. Please do well to connect with her, and let's do well to connect with everybody on the call if possible. Then there is an attendance on the chat box. Please do well to fill the attendance. For people, for all, if I know some people are saying would like to get the recording and the slides. So Mr. Wesley will be expecting the slides from you. And of course, if you want to get access to the slides and the recording, fill the attendance form. And having said that as well, thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you for joining, and do well to enjoy the rest of your day. Sorry, before we go, let's take pictures. Yes, that's our normal tradition. Let's try to put on our camera. And of course, please make sure you are in a very good background. Just put on a smile. Yes, I can see some people smiling. Mr. Joseph, Dr. Joseph, rather. Esther Paul, thank you so much. Mr. Peter, one of our VIP. Mr. Emeka, thank you so much for putting on your camera. Dr. Promise. I can also see Engineer Kingsley and Mrs. Basilia. Thank you so much for putting on your cameras. Please, let's try to smile. Dr. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining. And of course, I can also see Josephine Oluwabumi. You are looking so pretty. Thank you so much for joining. I can also see a lot of persons actually. Stanley Obotenu, Davida, Chinazo, and every other person on the call. Thank you so much for joining. And the media team, please, when you are done, let us know.
I haven't seen the attendance sheet though.
It's on the comment section. Just check. You'll see it has been dropped again. All right. Thank you so much for joining. We are done taking the pictures. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.